That's asinine. Doesn't make any sense. The debt and then immigration. I take care of immigration. Those are the main things I hit right off the bat.
Mr. Shaw, going for a little change of direction here. Back to Agenda 21. Do you see Agenda 21 as a threat to our liberties and our freedoms?
I see Agenda 21 as socialism. They're trying to take away control of our property. We've farmed in Yolo County in the Dunnigan Hills since the 1880s. We've maintained our soil tilth. We've protected the environment. We've regulated what grew on the soil. We kept it from eroding away. We kept it profitable. We've been good stewards of the soil. The government is never going to be a good steward of the soil. The government is trying to strip our rights away. Agenda 21 is socialism, and that's what it is, and we need to stand up and fight it, hands down. They're trying to force it through the UN across the whole globe. We need to stop it now. We need to keep the government off of our property and out of our lives. And it's like I say in the military, guys, you gotta trust your Marines. Our government has to trust you, its citizens, to do the right thing, and they're not doing it. They're stripping you of your rights. No Agenda 21, period.
Mr. Tubbs, do you think that the current level of regulation and intervention by the government is at a satisfactory level, or should it be changed?
Absolutely. First thing, and I'll hit this and give you a couple more ideas, because this has given me an extra time to talk about how to save the world. Obamacare, gotta repeal it. That's the biggest regulation that is coming down. Who owns small businesses? How many? How many? Do you have any idea how much Obamacare is going to cost you when this thing's fully implemented? You don't. It's an unknown. So when you go to hire somebody, you don't know how much it's going to cost. If you're still in business, you're a smart business person taking smart risks. You don't just throw money hoping it works out. So there's one. I'm going to talk about another regulation, coming at it from a different way. American Disabilities Act. I think it's a great regulation helping our disabled Americans have more access to normal life. I think it was a good idea. However, the way it's implemented is if a disabled American goes into your business and finds that your mirror is 2 inches too high, they can sue you for personal injury. And there's very, shall I say, slimy individuals out there taking advantage of that right now, making $10,000 a pop by finding infractions in businesses and just going down the street with lawyers. Regulation shouldn't be made where that's possible. That should be a fine, maybe, from the government. Certainly not some sort of personal injury lawsuit that's going to put you out of business or keep you from growing jobs. And I've talked to many business owners that have had that very thing happen to them. So when you talk about regulations, some are good, some are bad, but I'm giving you a little bit of insight of what I'm thinking of when I'm your congressman in D.C. Thank you.
Ms. Van, do you see the Constitution as a document that should change in the way that we read it over time, or do you believe that it should be strictly upheld in a more conservative way, no matter how long time may progress?
Well, I'm not going to tell anybody how they can read anything, first of all, how you phrase the question. But is the Constitution a document that should be a living and breathing document that changes? No. The Constitution is the Constitution. It's what sets forth this great country and the laws and the regulations we live by. We need to get back to it. We need to look at it when we're making decisions. We need to remind our wonderful justices what it is as well. It is a document that needs to be adhered to by us. But I'm not going to tell someone how they can or can't read it. But I think it's something that we as Americans should all be proud of, know very well, and live by every day.
Mr. Kaur, what is your opinion of Agenda 21? Do you think that it is helpful or hurtful to us and our freedoms?
Well, for those of you who don't know, I'm just basically not a big fan of the UN in general. I don't like even the thought of us taking marching orders from an unelected foreign entity. It's not what we do here. As far as Agenda 21 as a whole, you've got reforestation and a whole bunch of other things. I mean, to me, it basically sounds like, okay, you get off your property and we're not going to make sure anybody cuts the grass. We're just going to let it go wild, and we're not going to let anybody come back here. Oh, and by the way, we're also going to limit the amount of electricity the grid can provide, thus causing millions of deaths after its implementation. Agenda 21 is bad for not just us, not just our property rights, but as a whole, it opens up a can of worms that we're not going to be able to ever close. And the thing, you should really take a look at how they came up with this thing. They were sitting in Rio de Janeiro, on big, in the tropics, and all of their climate conferences always happen in these great vacation destinations, and they always happen in winter. So they're coming from New York or Denmark or something like that, and they're coming to the hottest area of the world, and they say, oh my goodness, global warming is killing us. I'd like to see them hold it in Fargo, North Dakota. I'm serious. I'd like to see them come up with a climate conference where they're not spending their collective country's money to go on a vacation and then come up with something to justify the time that they spent there. Out of time.
Mr. Carlos, are there any departments or programs in the federal government that you feel should be eliminated in order to help lower the size of government?
Yeah, clearly the federal government needs to be scaled way back. As far as specific departments, I don't know, I'd have to take a look, but I agree. I know that there's a lot of redundancy, not from specific research I've done, but I've heard about just redundancies within departments, a lot of overlap. But it's from Fox News, I mean, that's where I've seen it, but I see that, one of them I saw, I think there was 6 or 7 agencies that regulated the same, they had the same regulations, and any one of them would have been good. So clearly, we all know, and all the people, this is a Tea Party event, a conservative event, we all know that the federal government is bloated and wastes our money. So I think all 6 of us, as soon as we got there, if any of us were fortunate enough to beat Garamendi and get there, would scale back the federal government, scale back spending, change the regulatory climate, and make the tax code something that is business friendly. And certainly, if we were to beat Garamendi, that would be our mandate. I'm sure that's why we would be sent there. So that's what we would do.
Mr. Tubbs, what is your opinion of Agenda 21?
Okay, Agenda 21, coming from the UN. Now this is a little bit where my military background comes in, and some of the education I've had to have as a lower senior officer. The UN is a place, when it's used for its intended purposes, works. We bring countries together, we discuss things, we avoid going to war. And trust me, we're the big boy on the block. I mean, you see a lot of news stories about how China or Russia are standing in the way of what we're trying to do. Sure, that happens. But a lot of this stuff doesn't make the news. America's making the world a better place. Now, as your congressman, going back to military stuff, when I was an aircraft commander, still am, it's my job to take care of my crew as I'm accomplishing the mission around the world. As a squadron commander, which is what I'm doing right now, it's my job to take care of my squadron, the people in my squadron. As your congressman, it's going to be my job to take care of my district and my country. And when you look at something like Agenda 21 coming our way, conflicting, one, with our Constitution and property rights, oh, and they try to ban our guns through the UN too, right? Try to work with our child rights, remember, our parental rights? No, you have to look out for what's best for America when you're dealing with the UN. And Congress, the Senate, the President, again, elections have consequences. That's the view I will have when I'm working with anything to do with the UN. Agenda 21 is bad for America, bad for the Constitution, and bad for you. I'm against it.
Ms. Van, if elected to Congress, what would be your top 3 priorities for you to accomplish?
Top 3 priorities would be get spending under control and rein in our national debt, get jobs, which means getting the government out of the way, creating an environment where the people who put the capital back in the system to create these jobs feel comfortable enough to do it, enhance our national security, and massive regulatory reform. So that's 4, maybe 5. We've got to stop the bleeding on the spending and the national debt first. And that does also include addressing our taxing issue. The jobs. The only way we are going to get this country back on track is by increasing the number of real jobs in this country. And that means getting the government out of the way. As a county supervisor, I'm very proud of a little power plant that we have on the west side of our county. It's a 690 megawatt power plant. It burns natural gas and it recaptures the steam. It's a good one. We got out of the way so that the industry and the business could build it. It's created jobs, it's created tax revenue, and it has created energy that the state desperately needs. So that's a very good example of how you get out of the way. Regulatory reform needs to start at 2 levels. It needs to start at the macro level from above with not only repealing the funding for some of them, but repealing the legislation. And we need to chase down the bureaucrats that are overreaching in their authority as well. I'm out of time.
Mr. Carlos, same question. Top 3 priorities if you were elected.
Well, number 1 and number 2 are inextricably tied, and that's the military, national defense, which is 1, and our economy, the health of our economy, and our national debt, which is 2. Anybody that reads history knows that empires throughout world history have collapsed under the weight of their failed economy. I mean, militaries can only be sustained through a strong economy, and if you don't have a strong military, then you're subject to the whims of someone who has a stronger one. So those will be the first 2. Those should be the first 2 priorities for the Republican Party generally, and any congressperson or senator that represents our party. Those are the first 2 most important issues. And right now, our economy is, and I don't mean jobs wax and wane, cycles go up and down. I mean our long-term fiscal health. I mean our debt is going to have to be reckoned with at some point in the future. That will sink our country for our children and our grandchildren. Whether or not unemployment was 10% or 8% in 2012 isn't going to matter in 2030. But whether or not we continue to borrow, whether or not we continue to print money at the rate that we're going will matter in 2030, and it will be a life or death matter for our country. And so that's first and foremost. Number 3 is to get the Republican Party to win elections in California. So.
Mr. Ray, do you feel that the federal government oversteps its bounds and its authorities, using an example like the Commerce Clause?
Oh, no.
Far too often?
No. I like the fact that Michelle Obama's going to tell me what kind of food I can eat. I mean, because I'm not smart enough to figure out, what my diet ought to be. Yeah, no, they're definitely, they're trying to get way too much control. They're stepping into areas they have no business. I mean, that's not even, you can cite so many examples, and it's not even what we're talking about. I mean, it's just, as far as, I mean, it's extremely important, but it's open and shut. Yeah, they're moving stuff way too far.
Okay. Mr. Shep, do you feel that we should or should not have earmarks?
No, absolutely not. Here's the problem, folks. A bill should be just a few pages. But, one of my opponents over here said that, the government is micromanaging us. No, they're not micromanaging us. They're being micromanaged by political action committees and lobbyists, and they're coming to them with money saying, hey, I want this money for something, for this project, or I want this for that or that. So we need to add it to the bill. So he wants the money to get reelected. So he then goes to the party whip and says, I need to add this to the bill because they're going to give me some money to help me get elected or help some of my fellow Republicans get elected. And next thing you got earmark after earmark after earmark in that bill with spending that has nothing to do with the bill because they're negotiating, trying to add stuff onto those bills that have nothing to do with it. We need some way to get rid of these earmarks so each bill has to be simple, precise, and specific. I don't have the solution, but I sure hope you give me the job and send me back there and let me engage horns with these guys because we really need to clean it up. The spending is atrocious. And putting a rock and roll museum on a bill that's a water project bill is absolutely ridiculous. But they're doing it because they're trying to buy votes back and forth. And they're trying to buy votes because somebody wanted a rock and roll museum and they're willing to use some money and say we're going to give $5,000 in a tax or $2,500 to your reelection committee or we're going to help you get reelected. And we're up for reelection constantly. That needs to change. We need people, honesty and integrity back in Washington. Right now, you don't have it.
Mr. Core, how important do you think the Second Amendment is, and do you think gun control is a viable option?
Mr. Ray said it perfectly when he mentioned the quote from the Admiral of the Japanese Navy. Behind every blade of grass is a gun. And that's something that keeps us safe. Now, the Second Amendment was originally written so that we would be able to arm ourselves against an undemocratic government should the need ever arise. They had just finished fighting a war where penalty for fighting was not only being locked up or killed, but to have the stocks on your rifle broken and the barrel bent around a tree so that it could not fire against the Queen's army again. In the United States, there are 268 million privately owned firearms. It's triple the amount the United States military has. We know how to use them. And they can be used to repel an invading force. They can be used for our own personal protection. They can be used when someone needs to be deputized. And trying to take away our firearms, trying to limit the kinds of firearms that we can get. I mean, I understand certain restrictions when you come to, like, you know, mental health and former, you know, criminals and stuff like that, but going outside of the bounds and saying, oh, I'm sorry, you can't have that rifle because it has a 1-inch too long barrel. Or it's got a pistol grip that you can fit 4 fingers on and not just 2. You have stupid regulations like that, and I can go over to Nevada and get an AR. Can't really do much of that here. So the Second Amendment is there not only to protect us, but to remind us of where we came from, and any kind of limiting of the firearms that we are able to buy for our own protection limits our freedom as a people.
All right, and with that ends the questions for the candidates. We're going to give them 2 minutes each to go over anything they feel I may have missed. I'm sure there were quite a few. And just to sum up why they're running again and finish your closing statement. We're going to start with Mr. Tubbs this time, since we started with Mr. Schaub, and just come on back. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Hold on, before Rick starts, is Rick going to have a minute and a half and then a closing at the end? Or
Yeah, this is going to be a 2-minute close. Anything that you feel I missed, please feel free to go over it, and then, you know, sum up why you're running. And
No, I'm even more confused. This is the closing statement.
Closing statement.
Basically, what we're going to do, instead of doing a minute and a half to cover, and then a minute for closing, we're going to give you 2 minutes so that we don't run too long tonight. So we're going to give you 2 minutes to do your closing statement and cover any issue that you may feel you wanted to put a little time on. So, my mistake, I'm sorry.
No problem. I just want to make sure. Okay, let's break it on down. Tonight you've seen us all 6, all good people. No doubt about it. No doubt better in Congress representing you than what the current Congressman Garamendi is going to do. I vote for any one of these people before I vote for him. Tonight you've heard me on the issues. You've heard how I will represent you, how I will govern. Conservative, common sense, solution-based. One thing I learned in 2010 when I ran against George Miller was there's 2 types of skills you need to be a congressman. One, how to govern well. Some of our folks miss that. But the other is how to campaign, how to win the election. And it's not always the same thing. So I'm going to differentiate myself a little bit from my other fine fellow Americans here by giving you a little idea of how I campaign. I ran a District 7 last time, that was 3-to-1 Democrat to Republican against a 36-year entrenched Democratic icon, George Miller. If you ever see Nancy Pelosi, you see his white hair and white mustache right behind her. Very difficult. I had the cities of Vallejo and Richmond in my district. We were the 5th, top 5. Let me back up a second. No incumbent lost in California for one in 2010. But I was the top 5, in the top 5 of the 53 congressional races, doing better from 2008 to 2010. We, to use my military term, got our butts kicked, still, in District 7. However, we didn't lose 3-to-1, we lost 2-to-1. We won a lot of votes from the Democrat and Independent side. And in this district, there is still a Democrat majority of registration. Barbara Boxer lost to Carla Fiorina, but Meg Whitman lost to Jerry Brown. This district is a toss-up. We are going to need a candidate that can win votes from the other side. I have done it in 2010. In Vacaville, where I live, the Solano County part that is in our new district, George Miller won in 2008 against my predecessor, 54 to 40. I beat George Miller for those same votes, 57 to 43. Do that in Fairfield alone, and we beat John Garamendi in 2012 off the current election cycle. How did I do it? Because I tell you what, Republicans have a bad name with some Democrats, but I win those votes nonetheless. I don't change my solutions. I don't change my conservatism, my common sense, but I tell them, you know, I did grow up on welfare, not anti-welfare. You know, I am a union member as an airline pilot, and they start to scratch their head going, And instead of having the door slammed in my face, we start to be able to have a dialogue. And then we find the common goals, the common solutions, like we talked about. ADA is a great one. I'm not against regulations. ADA, let's fix it. And now we have Democrats coming over, voting for me, just like a couple, three down the street from here, last time I was up here, slammed the door in my face, wait. By the time I was done, 5 minutes later, 3 Democrat votes in the Rick Tubbs column. That's what differentiates me between these fine folks up here. That's how I will win in 2012 against John Garamendi. Thank you very much. God bless you. God bless America.
I didn't get the Second Amendment question, so real quick, Barack Obama did have it right. We cling to our guns and our religion. There's no doubt about that. We always have and we always will. Fortunately for us, in 2008, the Supreme Court passed, decided the Heller case, and the Second Amendment now guarantees every American the right to own a handgun and possess an operable handgun in his home. Before that, that wasn't clear. It's pretty amazing that after 220 years, that never reached the Supreme Court, but now it's clear they can't come in and take our guns, at least out of our home. And there's two issues with the Second Amendment. There's the policy issue: are we safer with guns or without guns? Clearly, we're right. We're safer with guns because when you pass a gun law, the people that would do bad things with the guns don't care about the law. It's only common sense. Fortunately for us, we don't have to worry about the policy debate because 220 years ago, the founders put it in the Constitution. It doesn't matter if we're right or wrong in the policy debate, they're going to have to pass a constitutional amendment to take our guns from us. I don't like their chances. Now on to my closing. What I'd like to talk about is much bigger than California Congressional 3rd District. It's the entire state of California and the Republican Party. I've hit on it already tonight. The Republican brand is pathetic in California right now. That needs to change. Prop 8 passed in 2008. 2008 was when Barack Obama won the presidency. It's a huge Democratic turnout in California, 2008. The Defense of Marriage passed. This is not a deeply liberal state. That is not true. The medical marijuana law was shot down. Marijuana is still illegal, kind of. This is not a deeply liberal state. It is a deeply democratic state, but there's a significant percentage of people registered as Democrats or that vote Democrats that are conservative people. On the whole, they agree with everything we've talked about tonight. Individual liberty, free markets, a strong national defense, limited federal government. Those people don't vote for the Republican Party because of the heated immigration rhetoric. We can solve the immigration problem, we can control the border, and deal with the national security issues as well as the labor issues only if we win elections. We can have disagreements, but it needs to be within the party. We don't all have to agree, but it needs to be within the party. There needs to be Republicans that support the Federal Dream Act. And that's for someone that has been here their whole lives, came over at 3 months old, and we don't send them back to Mexico. We give them a chance to prove themselves, put them on probation or whatnot. We don't have to agree on that, but it needs to be a debate within the party. It can't be a debate between Democrats and Republicans, or we lose.
really quick, I didn't get a chance to touch on the Prop 8 thing. The one thing that I don't hear very often in the media is that there is a precedent for our right to overturn a Supreme Court decision with the power of the California referendum, the power of the California voters. All right, in the late 1960s, there was the Furman decision, and what that did was a federal moratorium on the death penalty. California voters passed a referendum to reinstate the death penalty, and then there was another decision, I believe the Gates decision, that upheld the California voters' right because it was a state issue. It's happened before. We've overturned judicial activism. And we need to keep at the judicial, we need to keep after them, and we can overturn it again. Now that being said, I want to talk a little bit about electability. As some of you know, I work 2 jobs, and I also have 2 small children. I have a 3-year-old and a 3-month-old. And when it comes to the campaign, I've not been able to give it the attention that it requires, and that the people here deserve and should demand from a candidate. And were I to win the primary, there is no way that I'd be able to beat John Garamendi, because I'd be in the same boat I'm in now. And that being said, I am ending my campaign.
I'll tell you what, though, I enjoyed listening to you.
Thank you. I have been on the campaign trail quite a few times with some of the candidates up here, and I believe that there is someone up on the stage here with us tonight that will represent us, will represent our district, and will do an amazing job in DC. He will be who we need. And I know it's a little bit of a shock, but it's you, Rick. So my endorsement goes to Rick, and I'm very supportive of you. I'd like you to support Rick as well. And if you need anything from me, give me a call. If I'm not at one of my jobs or with my kids, then I'm your guy, okay?
Thank you, Rick.
And once again, thank you, everybody. Thank you for the Tea Party for inviting me out here. It means a lot. Yes, ma'am.
Would you please run for office locally?
I will talk to you afterwards, but I don't want to put Mr. Dukes out of a job. So.
No election coming to Yuba County.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure sharing stages with you. I admire absolutely everything you do. It takes a lot of hard work, and you've put it in. I completely admire everything you've done, Tim, and congratulations. You're a remarkable young man. Really. Friends, I'm a 5th-generation native to this new 3rd congressional district. I'm the only candidate that's done all these wonderful things that we've talked about this evening. I've stopped the overreaching bureaucrats. I've reduced government growth. I've reduced taxes. I've gotten out of the way of business and industry so they can flourish. I am proud of all of the things that you all stand for, and I'm proud that I've actually done the things that we've talked about. This seat has 3 great cores. We've got Yuba, Sutter, who makes up a 1/3 of it. We've got Glenn, Colusa, Yolo, that makes up a 1/3 of it, and a little portion of Sac County. And we've got Solano. We've got a 1/3, a 1/3, and a 1/3. We've got a great dynamic district here with 3 voting blocks that can take this seat from John Garamendi. One of the things I am most proud of is that John Garamendi's scared of me. He dropped a robocall on me in Yuba County, and you know what he called me? A Tea Partier. We ran around to so many different places trying to get this recorded, and it's the best. That's one of my proudest accomplishments. A couple weeks ago, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee in D.C. called Kim Van a threat to John Garamendi. Comstock magazine recently said Kim Van is the right Republican to take on John Garamendi. What I do know is it would be no bigger pleasure than to be your representative and to serve you. Not only am I the candidate who's raised money from in this district to win this campaign, but I'm the candidate that would best serve you and be available to you and be here for you. It would be my absolute honor to serve you in the U.S. House of Representatives.
When I was driving up here this afternoon, it reminded me, I went to Chico State, it reminded me when I used to drive to Chico to go to school. And you look at the farm ground and the prairies, the pasture ground, the orchards, the foothills, mountains, the pine trees, lakes, rivers, streams. I mean, there's not a more beautiful place in the world in this area that we're in. I mean, we're fortunate to live with a fantastic climate. And it has some of the nicest people you ever want to meet. And when you start going around the country, like I did traveling with some of my fighters, you find out most of the people around the country are the same way. They're left, they're right, they're Democrat, they're Republican, but actually, you have very few far left and far right. Most people just have a little left or right of center. And if you get a chance to sit down and talk to them, a lot of times they're surprised how much we all agree. The Republicans, we did well last time. I should say we did well last time. The Republicans did well in that last campaign. But being a world-class competitor and a world champion, I understand you need to understand your opponent. I ran the campaign last time. Let me back up. George Miller didn't even take us seriously. I ran like a hamster in a maze looking for cheese, bouncing off the walls. It's the first time I ever run for office. I had no idea what I was doing. Rick ran a fantastic campaign. George Miller walked through the neighborhood without even breaking a sweat. There were only 5 signs in our whole town because he didn't care. He knew from years past what he needed to do to win. John Garamendi may not be somebody that we want in office, but he is not going to be a cakewalk. The man's not only won 2 congressional elections, he's won 2 statewide elections. That's a big deal. Lieutenant Governor and Insurance Commissioner. And I attended, he spoke at the Board of Realtors a while back, and I noticed that he walked in, said nothing, said he'd been doing nothing for the housing market. I mean, very politely, that he wasn't going to do anything, committed to nothing, walked out, and I thought that he's the greatest thing since Wayne Mill. And I started laughing. My friend said, "What are you laughing at?" I said, he didn't say that he didn't do anything, he's not going to do anything. And they think he's awesome. So he's not going to be easy to beat. You have to have somebody, because the Democratic size of that area of the county, you have to have somebody that can win both sides. I can sit down with people and get both sides to agree. And once I've got some agreement, then I can start to solve problems. So the problem is, it doesn't matter how good you are, if you don't get elected, you can't get the job done. I have more friends than a human being is entitled to. And if I ever get enough time, because I'm working so many hours, if I ever get enough time to break loose, I'll turn them loose, and we can win. Once we win, we can make some changes. And thanks for inviting me, I appreciate it.
Can I break the mic? Oh, Lord. Is that going to tell you it's my time? Well, you were a Marine, right? Great things.
Right. Great things to win wars.
That's right.
Just win, baby.
Well, that's great.
That's all right. We're the Marines.
All right, good deal. We're good. Okay, folks, we're down to 5, just like in the presidential races. This is a no-nonsense attempt to restore our government. You've heard the 6 people talk tonight. We're down to 5. We have a United Airlines pilot. We have a county supervisor who's been a former congressional staffer. We have a real estate developer and a guy who happened to like Eugene Ray. And you have myself. You've heard us talk. I don't have any notes on my hands. I talk from the heart, just like all Marines do. In your local paper up here, they ended their comment when I announced saying, the difference between John Garamendi and myself will not be more stark. One's a Marine who raises his hand that goes to war, and one's a Democratic liberal who joins the Peace Corps to get out of going to war. Folks, I'm ready to go to war in Washington for you, because I believe in you, and I believe in our country, and I believe in our democracy. To beat John Garamendi, which is no easy task, we need somebody well-versed, somebody from agriculture, somebody who's been in the military, somebody who's been on school boards, somebody who's been in the political parties fighting in the trenches like I have for the past 30 years. Go home and Google my name. There's stuff that goes back 30 years ago. I've been fighting the hard fight for years. I can defeat John Garamendi, and I can do it without any notes, without any 3x5 cards. I can call a horse's rear end a horse's rear end. And that's what I see this is all about. This is a job interview. You've heard 6 of us interview tonight. We're down to 5. Who are you going to hire to be your representative? Who's the one that's going to defeat John Garamendi? Who's the one that's going to stand on the floor of the House of Representatives and say, we're tired of this, give us our country back, and let's turn this around and make our country great again? Folks, send the Marine. Thank you.
Can we get one last round of applause for all the candidates?